clear that the U.S. knew something was happening because media reports indicate as early as 2 days ago that the U.S. was removing its personnel from Iraq in light of an impending attack on Iran. So it is hard to conclude otherwise.
Laura Rockwood, President Trump warned Iran it had to make a deal before there's nothing left, pointing out there's already been great death and destruction. In your view, how serious a moment is this?
I think it's a very serious moment. I think it is unfortunate that the US and Iran talks aren't able to continue, and I don't see them continuing given the recent state of events. I am not overconfident about how well the talks would go if the United States was still insisting on absolutely no enrichment in Iran. This was actually the reason why the talks fell apart back in 2003. And look at how many centrifuges we have spinning nowadays. So I don't think that would have been a realistic starting point for the negotiations between the US and Iran. But I think where we are right now is at a very, very dangerous tipping point.
Well, and one of the dangers, of course, is when you look at Iran talking about several parts of a nuclear facility having been damaged. I mean, that sounds very worrying, doesn't it?
It is worrying. And of course, there's always the concern about the release of radiation, depending on what facility it was. But the real risk is the response to that kind of activity. Iran almost certainly will feel compelled to respond to that. And the big question is whether Iran will withdraw from the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. And you can be two minds about that. I rather think that it's a better bet that Iran will stay in the NPT in hopes that the global ire will be directed at Israel rather than at Iran itself. But there's no way of actually predicting that at this point in time.
Yeah, and it's the unpredictability, isn't it, that is so worrying, and indeed the fear of escalation on both sides, a kind of cycle of escalation.
Absolutely, absolutely.
The UN nuclear watchdog is in touch with Iranian nuclear safety authorities. Just take us through from your experience of what they'll be doing right now.
Well, in terms of safeguards, I'm certain that the Iranians are talking with Rafael Grossi, the head of the IAEA, about the nature of the damage to the facility. And as far as I know, to date, the only facility that has been effectively struck is at Natanz. And I do not know the nature of the destruction so far. I could imagine that there will be continuous conversations between the Iranians and the IAEA about the safety issues associated with the enrichment facility. But what the whole issue really comes down to is a question of safeguards. What has Iran been doing with its nuclear material? Has it failed to declare to the IAEA nuclear material and activities in which it has been conducting? So safety is one issue, and certainly if it gets any broader than Natanz, it could be very difficult. But the concern is about whether Iran has a nuclear weapons program. Now, if you take a look at the IAEA report, the most recent report—
That's the UN nuclear watchdog.
That's correct. The International Atomic Energy Agency has not concluded that there exists in Iran a current ongoing nuclear program, undeclared nuclear program. It talks about the undeclared nuclear program prior to 2003, about which we have spoken for many years. But even as late as 2003, there was a sense that whatever coordinated program Iran had for a weapons program had been dismantled. And you don't see in the most recent International Atomic Energy report that Iran has resumed it. What you do see is numerous instances of Iran's lack of cooperation with the IAEA. First of all, in the context of these 4 locations, now 3, where the agency found numerous particles of uranium, and they refer to them as anthropogenic, which simply means they may be natural uranium, but they are not naturally occurring uranium. Anthropogenic means that they have been processed. So
Yeah.
on at least 3 of these sites where the agency has had access, they have found indications of natural uranium that suggests it has not been declared to the IAEA. That's the first instance. The second instance of lack of cooperation has to do with Iran's de-designation of a number of safeguards inspectors. What does that mean? It means we, Iran, no longer want these particular safeguards inspectors coming to our country. And it started with a Russian enrichment specialist, which surprised everybody because it was a Russian specialist,
Mm.
and was followed up by a fair number of de-designation of other inspectors, interestingly enough, enrichment specialists. So that's particularly concerning given the sensitivity of enrichment activities. And then, of course,
So,
the third issue, go ahead, sorry.
sorry, do tell me the third. Sorry.
But there are 2 more. One is the sanitation of locations, and they've been doing that since back at Labizan Shian, back in the early 2000s. But they have been doing it recently, 2018, 2019. I don't recall which particular location. I think it was probably Turkisabad. But after the agency raises the issues associated with these locations, the agency, the IAEA, is able to detect efforts by Iran to sanitize those locations. And the fourth and final concerning issue, it's a it sounds like a very arcane legal issue, but under its safeguards agreement, Iran agreed back in 2003 to tell the agency very early on when it was planning on building a new facility. If you look at the report, you'll see that it refers to Code 3.1 of Iran's subsidiary arrangements general part. They agreed to this early provision of design information for new nuclear facilities back in 2003. Subsequently, they decided they would no longer provide early information on new facilities. That decision on the part of Iran is not legally supportable. They should
Right.
be tell they should be telling the agency about any decision they have, and giving the agency information about the design of new facilities. They didn't do it with Fordo, and it seems they may not be doing it with other facilities in light of their public statements that they have decided to build some additional facilities, nuclear facilities.
So all of that helps explain why on Wednesday the UN nuclear watchdog passed a resolution accusing Iran of non-compliance with its obligations. Does that help explain why Israel has made its move now?
That's an interesting question. I think Israel was already planning on doing this, and I think the fact that the IAEA Board of Governors decided to adopt this resolution may have suggested to Israel that that gave them additional justification for striking Iran, possibly. I don't know the
Mm.
workings of their minds, but one could imagine that they were going to do it anyway. And in light of this board resolution finding Iran to be non-compliant,
Mm.
possibly they would have thought they had it
A
would be an
pretext.
easier,
Yeah.
exactly, an easier argument to make. Correct.
I mean, when you look at the situation now, and obviously there's so many uncertainties, as you've alluded to, given your vast experience in high level negotiations in Iran, what would you be advising the US to do now in terms of just trying to sort of calm this situation, stabilize things? What can happen next?
I think there are 2 things that would be critically important for the US government to do to demonstrate leadership at this point, to try as effectively as they can to be in touch with the Iranian leaders, to try to counsel that clearer heads prevail. And also, with respect to Israel, I don't think the Iranians will accept that Israel undertook these actions without the tacit approval of the United States. I think it
Mm.
is it behooves the United States to really step up and exert a diplomatic pressure here on Israel and on Iran.
Do you think Israel did have the tacit approval of the US?
I think it's pretty clear that the US knew something was happening because media reports indicate as early as 2 days ago that the US was removing its personnel from Iraq in light of an impending attack on Iran. So it is hard to conclude otherwise.
And given Trump in the past has stopped Israel from acting, why didn't he this time?
Excellent question. Might be one you should ask President Trump.
And what do you fear? The fact that this hasn't been stopped, it has gone ahead, this moment that many have feared has arrived. What do you fear will happen next?
I can see no instance in which Iran will not retaliate. I could imagine there will be some serious retaliation. How capable they will be now, given the attacks on Iran, I don't know. But there's no question in my mind that Iran will feel compelled to have a serious attack. What I do hope is that Iran will not choose to withdraw from the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, which is something that people are talking about nowadays.
Laura Rockwood, thank you very much for joining us.
It's my pleasure, Kathy, anytime.